There was no acting required. It was absolutely amazing.
Wow.
Amazing. We did it for about a week. The whole section took about a week because there were all sorts of kills, and Benedict comes through a tent at one point. Patrick Kennedy jumps over a fire, and it was to be at the center of an action sequence directed by probably the greatest action director who's ever worked in the medium was an amazing privilege.
It's great to do a movie where action actually means action, isn't it? Because in my movies, action means have a cup of tea and tell someone you love them, which isn't really action, is it?
But that's a rather beautiful thing.
It's another kind of action.
Yeah.
So, Richard, you really just
I write movies about people who want more action.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they get it at the end of the movie.
They get
after the credits.
Probably a better kind of action.
Yeah,
arguably.
a more pleasing kind of
action. A more long-lasting action, certainly.
Did you really just write Charge for that sequence, or was it a little bit more involved?
No, he wrote the whole... he's been very modest.
There's
7 pages of there's 7 pages of stuff. It's amazing. And each beat as well was meticulously planned by both Richard and Stephen. And,
not bad.
I remember. And you did stuff about people's attitudes to it and German reactions.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's the climactic scene for 3 of the most important characters in the movie for a start. So.
Absolutely. Okay, let's get some of your questions now. Put your hands up, yes, and then we'll get some floating microphones going around you guys in the front row here, please.
Okay, hello. You've touched a little bit on what it's like to work with His Holiness Steven Spielberg. Could you elaborate? Was it overwhelming? Because I spent 60 seconds in his company the other day and was talking 10 to the dozen. I love Jurassic Park. So could you let us know what it was like?
Like now?
Yeah, I was really rambling, more than now.
Well, I've got, 2 things. I thought he hated me because in about 1994, I went to the Césars, which is an award ceremony in France, and they have one award for foreign films. And I remember the nominees included Four Weddings and a Funeral, Schindler's List, and I think Pulp Fiction or something. And this very serious German film director came out and said, I'm about to give the award for Best Foreign Film. Mr. Spielberg, if you do not win this award, it is an insult to the honor of France and the intelligence of all the French people that will never be forgotten. And then he opened the envelope and Four Weddings had won because it was a popular vote done in cinemas. And so I always assumed he hated me. So my entire relationship has just been waiting for the moment when he snaps, because he's such a charming, gentle, friendly, instinctive man to deal with, isn't he?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing that when you first meet him, you just get so struck by his extraordinary kindness and his humility. He just is so collaborative. He's so honest about what he can and can't do, and then utterly brilliant in a way that I'm not sure he realizes. Just the clarity and the speed of his thought about filmmaking, about shots, about what's emotionally needed in a scene. It's a jigsaw puzzle. I mean, for him, it's something that he so clearly envisages in his own mind, almost like a kind of one of those enormous puzzles that my mum used to get for Christmas. He sees the picture before he makes it, and then he's just about helping people make that picture. He cuts in at lunchtime and on Saturday, so that by the time we finish that, we did 2 weeks of that cavalry charge, which means he was in the edit on the first Saturday. And by the time we came in to start the second week, he'd cut all of the first week's footage and was ready to so he didn't waste anyone's time, and he knew exactly how to get what he needed out of everybody. Meanwhile, it's just like he'll direct everybody immaculately to do their thing. Janusz Kaminski, I need you to do this. Rob Inch, the stunt choreographer, I need you to do this. Tom, I need you to do this. Can we get some horses ready for this thing? And then he'll say, what were you asking about Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade? Anyway, so Sean Connery's in the air balloon, and then he tells you, for 25 minutes, he tells you the anecdote you've always wanted to know. And it's just that the generosity of the man is astounding.
Is there
I thought when we were working on writing it, that's the richness of his ideas. He can, just like you'd expect a great musician to just be able to play you a new tune, he does imagine 5 minutes of cinema just off the top of his head. So you would say, well, this is what's going to happen. You say, okay, well, how about the fact that they're sitting there and then suddenly he looks out the window and you see a whole bunch of German trucks. When you get there, you can see that they're not Germans and 400 people spill out. They spill across the field. They pluck all the fruit from across the field. He's in there. And you say, yeah, that sounds good. And they say, but what happens if we try something a bit smaller? And he'll go, okay, so they're sitting there in the room, and then wait, see one single German walking along, and he'll come up with another whole 5 minutes. It's as though a tap that is shut with many people is open with him. And then on the day, I was very impressed by his fluidity. You know, it suddenly strikes you that, as it were, Picasso didn't turn to anyone else and say, is it okay if I do a bit of blue here? and I thought this line was going to be straight, but I think I'll curve it. You know, he's got that ease on the day of not behaving as though there are 300 people and all that complexity, but of simply shaping what he sees and wants.
Yeah.
Is that right?
And in the most deft and supportive way. I remember that there's a scene between Patrick Kennedy and myself in the officer's mess before we go to France. And we'd been outside doing all this external stuff, a lot of action, and it was a really intimate scene, and we were inside suddenly. And he was getting himself in the mood by playing soundtracks. And then he let the shot be set up, and he suddenly, quite suddenly said to Mitch Dubin, his long-term camera operator, he said, "Mitch, I got this one." And he sat behind the camera, got on the seat, and he just got behind the lens and said, "Tom, you don't mind if I shoot this, do you?" And I was like, "No." But he didn't say this, but it was his way of saying, it's between you and me now. I'm sitting in the front row. And it was just the most beautiful, supportive act of generosity. He's incredible.
Yes, gentleman in the middle here. If you can get the microphone there. Thank you.
Hi, Tom.
Hi.
I'd just like to ask you a quick question regarding your process in terms of getting into the character, and what was your kind of like research? Did you have to do any research in terms of the character itself?
Yes, I did. I always do, and I don't have any hard and fast rules. I wish I did. It would make my life so much easier. But what I tend to do is, I suppose it comes from a kind of terror that I won't have done enough, and that, initially, and that I'll be playing too close to home, and that somehow too much of Tom or too much of the wrong part of Tom will bleed into the character. And it's very important to me to build a world around the character that exists in my imagination, and it doesn't matter who it is. And that can come from anything. It can come from books I read, or music, or films, or images, or just things that people say. It's like, with each character, once I've got a job and I know I'm doing it and I know I'm starting in 8 weeks' time, everything I see or hear is filtered, or I'm listening to it at a particular frequency. And I go, that's useful. You know, I'll be watching the news and it'll be about the war in Afghanistan. And I'll be like, soldiery, family, honor, decency. But with this particular part, what was most important for me was his mixture of kindness and decency, and also discipline and propriety, so that he was believably a soldier, and also but someone who was just very kind. And I read so much. I read lots of First World War stuff. I reread Journey's End by R.C. Sheriff, which is brilliant on that. Birdsong, the poems of Sassoon and Wilfred Owen. I watched everything, every horse film I could. The Errol Flynn, Charge of the Light Brigade, right the way through to Seabiscuit and Black Beauty, and there's an Australian one, the name I've forgotten now. The Horse Whisperer, Waterloo. There's a fantastic film of Waterloo, actually, and also just the riding. I mean, I read the 30 pages of Richard's screenplay that I was in, and I was on a horse basically the entire time. And Stephen had said to me, "I want you to do all this riding. There are no stunt doubles." And I thought, my God, I have to look immaculate. And there was the thrill of learning a new discipline, of learning a new skill in approaching a role. The same I would do the same if I was playing